Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to show you a brief video before with vital information. And then after, we'll take some questions and answers if necessary. Also, at the end of the recording, you'll hear a mention of some polls, and we have decided today to not utilize those polls. So congratulations once again. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. To the Recordings at Risk Recipient Informational Webinar. We'd like to begin by congratulating you all once again on being selected as grant recipients for the Recordings at Risk program. There are a varied and remarkable collection of projects represented here, and we know how much work has gone into them already. We're excited to share some information about what happens next as your projects begin. We're going to start off with some introductions, first to this platform and then to our team. To start off, we want to share some notes about how you can use Zoom during this meeting. A live transcript is being generated if you'd like to utilize it. To turn on this feature, click the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, you're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displaying on your Zoom screen, you can hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen and open it manually. In order to send a message to everyone, remember to change the default from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. Because of how busy chat can get, we ask that you use the separate Q&A box to ask questions today, which can be opened the same way as the chat box. You can submit questions at any point during the webinar, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. If you're following along with questions as they come in, you can upvote them if they're similar to your own to let us know that it would be helpful to you to have them answered live. The session recording and transcript will be made available on the Manage and Award page of our website within a week.
We always like to start by reminding everyone of CLEAR's mission. The Council on Library and Information Resources, or CLEAR, is an independent nonprofit organization that forges strategies to enhance research, teaching, and learning environments in collaboration with libraries, cultural institutions, and communities of higher learning. Recordings at Risk is just one of many programs administered by CLEAR and is generously supported by the Mellon Foundation. Cycle 11 was the second of 3 cycles we have to award through our current parent grant. Cycle 12's call for proposals will open in January of 2025. The grants team also currently has an open call for our other regranting program, Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Underheard Voices, that will close October 30, 2024. CLEAR's work is accomplished by a relatively small staff of about 20 geographically distributed individuals. Today's webinar is led by the grants team, which administers CLEAR's active regranting programs, offering support for the entire grant cycle, from application to final report. Some or all of you may already know us from applicant webinars or from email exchanges, but the team is comprised of Sharon Burney, Program Officer from Gainesville, Florida, myself, Alyson Pope, Program Officer from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Jane Larson, the Program Associate from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Louisa Quasigra, the Managing Director from Chicago, Illinois, and Lizzie Albert, the Deputy Director of Operations based in Washington, D.C.
Our team would like to center today's conversation by acknowledging that as residents of the United States, we are speaking to you from unceded land of many indigenous peoples. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of the land, water, and air where I live, the Temecula and Seminole peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on their homelands and ask you to join me in acknowledging all Indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations, May this acknowledgement and the program we're speaking about today demonstrate CLEAR's commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism.
During today's session, we'll spend our time with an overview of some of the things you'll need to know about managing your grant. We'll go over an introduction to your reporting requirements so that you can have them in mind throughout the project. We'll cover how and why to request a modification, and then turn to some final notes, including advice from past recipients. We'll end with time for some questions for you, as well as time for your questions for us. We especially want to welcome staff who may not be overseeing these projects, but working on them day to day. It's really important to us that you hear about all of these details too, so that you understand how your work fits into your organization's grant and into larger cultural heritage preservation efforts at CLEAR. And so I'll turn the floor back over to Sharon.
The challenges you may encounter could mean you'll need a project modification, and we'll get to that later in the presentation. For now, we'll start with CLEAR's reporting requirements for grantees. Seeing what will be required at the end of your project may help you decide how to document progress and keep metrics about the work. We hope this will make reporting easier when your projects are complete. Your starting point will always be the Recordings at Risk Manage and Award page. In much the same way as the Apply for an Award page helped guide your proposal writing, the Manage and Award page is a one-stop shop for grant recipients with information on all the administrative components of holding a CLEAR grant. Most of the information we'll be covering today can be found there if you ever need a refresher on our policies. The recording of this webinar will also be posted to this page. You were all awarded this grants this spring in the 11th Recordings at Risk competition. For that reason, you will hear us refer to you as a group as our Cycle 11 recipients. To keep things easy for everyone, we start by putting everyone on the same 12-month timeline for completion of projects, regardless of the project length you originally proposed. We hope this will set your projects up for success. Given the 12-month timeline, all of you have been assigned a project end date of August 31st, 2025. This is a date by which all approved project activities, including digitization, metadata creation, and providing whatever access you're providing, should be complete. Grant funds may only be expended during this 12-month period. To change this timeline, you'll need to get approval from us, which we will cover shortly. Given the compact nature of your projects, we start by only requiring a final report. Final reports are due within 30 to 90 days of project completion. So this would mean that the latest possible reporting deadline would be November 30th, 2025. You may find that your project ends earlier than August 31st, 2025, or that you're ready to submit your report earlier than November 30th, 2025. Submitting the final report early is welcomed. You'll just need to contact the CLEAR Grants team at recordingsatrisk@clear.org so we can start the reporting process.
Grant reports are submitted through the online grant management system SM Apply, just like your proposal, using the same login and password as your proposal submission. In addition to a narrative about your projects and total materials digitized, we also require a full financial reporting. If you forget the login credentials or lose access to them for any reason, for example, if the person who created your application leaves your organization, you will need to contact us through the program email, recordingsatrisk@clear.org, so that we can link your report to the correct credentials. One of the system's safety measures ensures that only the primary account holder is able to submit a report. So if you've added collaborators to your proposal space and one of them eventually needs to submit, that person will still need to contact us to make sure this can happen. You can also find a link to SM Apply on the Manage and Award page. All communication and reminders for reporting will be sent to the active PIs and any additional contacts you have provided to our team. If there are any others involved in project work who need such notifications, you will need to send the names and contact information for those people to our program email address. Please share this information as soon as possible so we can keep our records up to date. We're now going to take you on a tour of the final reporting form itself. If, due to a future modification to your project, you are required to submit an interim report, most elements will be the same. The first section of the report is the quantitative assessment. Here you'll be entering information related to numbers and types of recordings nominated for digitization, the number of archival master files produced, and variances between the estimated and actual digitization numbers. To complete this part, it will be helpful to have access to your original proposal for your project. Taking the time now to put a copy of your proposal in a place where all team members can access it is a good idea. You can download a copy of your proposal by logging into the system using the same credentials you used to create your application. If you don't know where to find a copy of your proposal, you can email us to ask for one. The next reporting section includes space to document project developments, both internal and public. Internal developments may include things like digitization metrics, such as tracking time, data for steps in the project workflow, preparing materials for shipping to the vendor, metadata creation, ingest, etc. The implementation of new workflows, standards, protocols, and/or procedures for digitization and description, the implementation of new tools or systems, and new donations and/or grant applications. CLEAR pulls together data about the impact of its program for its own annual report to the Mellon Foundation, so providing as many details as you can about the ways that this opportunity affected your organization, collections, staff, and ways of working will be very helpful to us. Taking notes somewhere about the impact of this grant will help you easily complete this section. We also want to hear about public developments, such as the creation of new blogs, social media accounts, websites, or even content created for existing ones, research guides, online or physical exhibitions or news articles, the incorporation of digitized materials into curricula at any educational level, or publications or presentations about the project or arising from research using the digitized materials. Again, keeping a file with copies of these kinds of documentation will make the reporting process easy for you. You will also have a chance to append copies of these documents to your report, demonstrating the varied and creative ways you will use your project to educate and serve others.
Here's a quick glimpse of what these impact questions look like on the reporting form. The report form includes simple checkboxes to document activity, which you'll then have the opportunity to explain further in the narrative portion of your report. Here is the checklist for eternal impacts. And here is the checklist for public outcomes. Because Recordings at Risk is designed to support smaller scale efforts focused on preservation reformatting of audio and audio-visual materials over short periods of time, CLEAR does not expect that all of these things will happen in the course of your work. Most recipients just check 2 or 3 boxes here, and some don't check any at all, and that is okay. Check any boxes that do apply to you so we will know to look for them in your narrative and to account for them in our own summary reporting to Mellon Foundation. Next, we ask grant recipients to share with us where users can go to find information about the digital copies of the recordings reformatted through your project. Some of you will be providing public access to both the digital files and the associated metadata created through your project, and others may only be providing public access to the metadata. CLEAR expects you to provide access as you described in your proposal. This is a good place to remind everyone that creating and providing access to metadata for the digital copies of the recordings created through your project is a requirement of the program, unless a specific exception was made in your proposal for cultural reasons. CLEAR expects that you will create and publish online at least some basic metadata for the digital copies of the recordings, so people can learn about what you have. At the end of your project, you may still have work to do to add richer descriptions, subject headings, or even transcriptions or captions, but we do expect that some basic records about what you've done be posted somewhere online. In the report section, you'll have the option to include up to 10 URLs. We encourage you to provide a few high-level links to the collections rather than many lower level links. These links allow us to verify that you have made metadata accessible at the least, as well as verify that those of you who can make the digital surrogates of recordings available for streaming online have done so. Again, we understand for some of you, legal and ethical issues will make it impossible to provide full access to copies of your recordings. If this is the case, you just need to provide one or more links to where your metadata is at the end of your project. You can also provide more information about future locations for your metadata and files in the narrative sections of your report. You'll then provide the contact information to the project PIs, service provider, and the person who should be contacted if questions emerge about the report.
The final question in the report form is a financial narrative. In the financial narrative, you should comment on actual grant expenditures during the reporting period as they relate to your proposed budget. The financial narrative is also where you are able to address any grant modifications that may have included budget reallocations. Every budget category included in the original proposal budget should be addressed here, and if there are any variances of 5% or more between projected and actual spending, make sure to include a detailed explanation here. Once you've completed all of the form prompts, you will either save this section of the form or mark it as complete. At any point, you can select Save and Continue Editing if you need to pause work on the report form. Marking the report form as complete will take you to the review page where you can double-check the information you entered and review the additional steps you need to take. There are a few documents to upload before you'll be ready to submit your report. On the left of the screen, SM Apply displays a list of buttons that will prompt you to upload the remaining components of the report, which we'll go over now one by one.
The first and perhaps most important part of your report is the project narrative. This will be an uploaded document of no more than 6 pages, which will contain the types of information listed here: a summary of the project and purpose of your grant, your progress towards expected outcomes where you can explain the numbers, including any variances in your quantitative section, any surprises, setbacks, and challenges that you faced, significant accomplishments and lessons learned, and finally, your future plans. Ultimately, this is the information that will help us create resources that can be of use to other organizations wanting to initiate their own AV digitization projects. We'll also share the lessons learned from grantees with our funder, the Mellon Foundation, which receives a complete copy of every report. If you take time to complete notes somewhere about these topics during the course of your project and save those notes in the same place you keep your copy of the original proposal, you will thank yourself when the report deadline approaches. Here's a screenshot of what the system displays when you're asked to upload the form. The task instructions include directions about all the topics your narrative report should cover. Select the Attach File button to upload your complete PDF document, and then select the Mark as Complete button. Final reports require a project manifest, a spreadsheet which includes the names and locations of the digital files, normally the access copies, as well as notations about any checksums and restrictions. This requirement allows us to use an automated web crawler that CLEAR has developed to conduct periodic checks that the online files created through CLEAR's digitization regranting programs are in fact online. Note that CLEAR's template for this has multiple tabs, including one with instructions, so be sure to read through all of them. Taking a look at this template now and building in time to create this document into your workflow will help you save time later. Normally, your digitization vendor will return a spreadsheet to you that will be very similar to what you need to submit here, and you should be able to adapt the vendor spreadsheet for this template. If you work out your file naming conventions at the start and ensure your vendor names your files exactly according to your needs, most of your work for this requirement will be done. If you leave it until the end, it might take some effort to pull it together. So we do strongly recommend coming up with a strategy for compiling this data during the course of project work. Of all the pieces of the final report, this document is what allows us to verify that you have created all the deliverables agreed upon when you received funding. If in the midst of your project, issues arise that will affect your ability to reach the goals included in your application, reach out to the CLEAR Grants team so we can help you decide the best course of action. We will go over how to do that shortly, but first, let's finish the report form.
The last required upload is the financial report. We already discussed the financial narrative, which is part of the report form task. The financial report is the upload task that supports that narrative. This is an upload using the same budget and financial report template that you submitted with your proposal. A copy of the financial report was emailed to all PIs at the same time, along with your award letters. Be sure to save that form to use for your future report. The budgeted numbers are already complete, so you'll just need to fill in the actual fields of the template. If you lose this file at any point, just let us know. It's very important that you use this template for your financial report rather than any internal financial forms your institution may use. Some of you may find that you do not spend all of the grant. This is okay. We will, however, expect you to return any unexpended funds exceeding $100 to CLEAR at the time you submit your final report. Our Manage and Award page includes more information on CLEAR's return of funds policy. To help facilitate collaborative report drafting outside the online system, we've also created a Google Doc template that your team can use to prepare your draft report. The document includes all of the information requested in the report, covering both the questions on the form and the documents that will be added as uploads. Some of you may have used a similar template when you prepared your applications. It's the same principle here, just make your own personal copy of the document and save it somewhere your team members can find. Then when your team is happy with your responses, copy and paste from the document into SMApply to submit your report. You can access the Google Doc template using the link on our Recordings at Risk Manage and Award page. To make a personal copy of the template that you can edit, click on the text that says, "Click here to make a copy of this document." This copy can then be shared with anyone who will be assisting on the draft report. We'll share the link to the template in the chat. You can just take a look or even make a copy now so you can keep your notes about your project in that space for easy drafting later. Now I'll pass things back over to Sharon.
Now that we've made it through the reporting form, we'll address how you can make changes to your plans if unforeseen delays, problems, or staffing changes happen during the course of your work. Over the course of many grant projects, we've seen that the need often arises to request a modification. Due to the unpredictability of audio and audiovisual digitization initiatives, such requests are extremely common for this program. So please don't hesitate to ask us for the changes you need to successfully complete your project. CLEAR has an online modification request form through which recipients can notify us of any modification requests, such as no-cost extensions, PI changes, and reallocation requests. The form was designed to streamline the process and reduce the amount of time spent making and approving these requests. Access to the grant modification and extension request form is available through a link at the top of the Manage and Award webpage, which is always the best place to access the most up-to-date forms and information on managing your award. The form is designed to allow for the request of multiple types of modification requests at the same time. The form includes space for you to submit budget information, requested extension length if needed, and to provide a brief explanation of the modification. In order for you to prepare the necessary information for the modification request, we also provide a Google Doc grant modification form template, also available on the Manage and Award page. This shows the Google Doc template for the modification request form, so you know the questions that you'll be asked and can draft responses. As with all of our Google Doc templates, a link is provided at the top of the document that allows you to create a copy of the template for collaborative working. All modification requests should be submitted through the online form, so you will need to copy and paste your prepared responses into that space. Here's a glimpse of the current grant modification and extension request form. In many cases, completing the form will be all you need to do to get approval for a modification. However, under certain circumstances, additional documentation may be required in order to move forward with the request. Always be sure to check the Manage and Award page for additional explanation of the various allowable modification requests and the most current policies and procedures. Multiple types of modification requests can be submitted at the same time using the same form. For example, if you need to request a no-cost extension as well as a reallocation of funds, the form will accommodate both requests. Once the form has been submitted and received, you should hear from CLEAR staff within 2 weeks. If you have any questions about the process, CLEAR staff is always available via email through our program email address, recordingsatrisk@clear.org. Now for some additional information about the types of modification requests. No-cost extensions are allowed in the case of unforeseen delays, such as hiring or vendor processing delays. These are very common, but it's important to understand that you can only receive one extension per project. It may be useful to set a calendar reminder now to help you remember to evaluate whether or not you'll need to request an extension as your project end date approaches. For those who may be new to grants, a project end date is not the same as the reporting deadline. The project end date is the date by which all project work should be complete. It is important that extension requests are submitted about 4 to 6 weeks prior to the project's end date, which is August 31st, 2025. Even if you have spent all the grant funds, you will need an extension if you require additional time to complete your proposed project deliverables, including making the metadata for your project available online. If all project deliverables are not complete by the end date, you will need an extension. If you need to update principal investigators or PIs, please let us know as soon as possible by completing the grant modification form. All of CLEAR's grant management tasks require current contact details, so it is important we know when a PI departs your organization and their responsibilities are transferred to someone else. In order to complete the change of PI, you will also be required to supply via email a letter from the head of the organization or department or on organizational letterhead. The letter should include the name, title, and contact information of the new PI, as well as the date the change will become effective. A CV or resume for the new PI will also be required for our files.
On occasion, grantees find it necessary to spend grant funds in a manner other than originally proposed in their application. For example, vendor services may cost more or less than originally budgeted. Reallocations of grant funds are allowable, but these changes must be approved by CLEAR staff prior to the reallocated funds being spent. In cases where a budget surplus remains after the original deliverables have been met, you will have the option of either returning the surplus funds to CLEAR or submitting a budget reallocation request that proposes how the remaining funds will be spent. Any proposed use of reallocated funds should be aligned with the original goals and scope of the project and within the current guidelines for allowable and disallowable costs for the Recordings at Risk program. The first step for a reallocation request is completing the grant modification form, where you can explain the rationale for the reallocation and how it is consistent with the original proposal. CLEAR staff encourages spending surplus funds on additional digitization of material or increased spending for another previously approved line item in the project budget, rather than adding new line items. If a mutually satisfactory reallocation solution cannot be found, remaining funds must be returned to CLEAR. Note that small reallocations amounting to less than 5% of the total project budget and within the program guidelines do not require a formal reallocation request, but we do ask that you explain these variances in your final report. If questions arise about whether or not you need official approval of a reallocation request, we are always available through email. In some rare instances, such as when a reallocation request involves a new budget line item, our team will require the completion of an updated budget document. This is the same budget template for your application and reporting. CLEAR staff can provide a copy to you if needed. If approved, this new budget will replace the one emailed to you along with your award letter. Some information will remain the same, such as your project start date and award amount. You will need to update any lines where you are proposing a change in amount and add any additional lines as needed if you are proposing a new spending category. In some cases, reallocations may happen within already approved line items. When that is the case, we likely will not require the submission of a new budget. An explanation of the changes submitted through the grant modification form and your final report will suffice. We've encountered a few other types of modifications in this program that are important to process with CLEAR prior to implementing the changes. From time to time, recipients find that the vendor they selected in the application may not be able to fulfill the project after award. Or perhaps your organization has a policy against pre-selection of a vendor and your selection process post-award has identified a more suitable option. Or maybe to help with processing, you'd like to add a second vendor. Any of these should be approved by CLEAR prior to starting work with a new vendor so that we are in agreement that the new vendor meets the digitization standards approved in your application. As mentioned when we were discussing budget reallocations, you may find that you have funds and capacity to add other in-scope materials to your project. Or perhaps digitization costs are much higher than estimated and significant amounts of material now need to be cut from the project. Work with CLEAR through the modification project to agree on these changes. We've also supported the addition of other allowable processing work, such as additional transcription, to help spend down remaining funds. These are just a few examples of other types of modification. We may ask for additional supporting documentation to help us understand and document the changes to your projects. We are always glad to answer any questions you might have. As we near the end of our presentation, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box for us to address in a little bit.
Our recipients have shared so much with our team through their reports and conversations. Here are some points stressed by them that may be useful to you as you get started. Metadata creation for audiovisual materials takes a lot longer than originally anticipated for most recipients. For this reason, past recipients advise that new recipients consider how they can lay the groundwork for creating project metadata while waiting for materials to be returned from the vendor. Taking digital photographs of the containers for your recordings may help expedite metadata creation while the vendor has them, so consider whether it might be possible to do that. 2, get your whole project team together, including your vendor, as early as possible to make sure everyone understands individual roles and responsibilities, even if their contributions will only be made late in the project timeline. That way, each team member can make room on their schedules to do what they need to do in a timely and efficient manner. It is particularly important for people responsible for ingesting digital files into storage systems or creating metadata for those files to understand what will be expected of them, and for them to remain aware of any changes to the project timeline. Don't forget, it's okay to request a grant modification if it turns out that the grant term is insufficient for creating metadata and making it available online. 3, if the recordings to be digitized for your project are a part of a larger collection, set aside some additional backup items from that collection to send to your vendor as well, just in case the digitization work costs less than originally estimated. or the content of the materials is unrecoverable. If you have extra funds left over, you can then submit a grant modification request to CLEAR, seeking permission to authorize the vendor to digitize the backup items as part of the project. And four, keeping notes and documentation for your project in one common place for easy reference will make final reporting easier. Determining how you're going to gather the information needed for the project manifest now, in particular, will save you valuable time.
We want to quickly share a couple ways to get involved with CLEAR's communities. The Digital Library Federation, or DLF, virtual forum is October 22nd to the 23rd this year, and we hope that you'll think about joining us. We also invite you to sign up for our Grants and Programs newsletter if you aren't already. This occasional newsletter shares updates across CLEAR along with other things we think are interesting. We'll share that link in the chat. Finally, there are more than 10 amazing working groups coordinated by DLF, where practitioners meet regularly on a variety of digital library topics. A couple I want to shout out in particular are the Metadata Support Group, which runs a Slack space for folks dealing with metadata, and the Digital Accessibility Working Group, which is offering accessibility audits of websites and systems, which you can contribute to or take advantage of.
We love to boost the excellent work of our grantees. If there are exciting developments you would like shared with a wider audience, don't hesitate to let us know. One of the easiest ways for us to share your news and accomplishment is to tag us on Twitter at Clear Grants so that we can retweet you. If you happen to be describing the Recordings at Risk program in any formal press releases, we appreciate you reviewing CLEAR's acknowledgement guidelines, linked to on our CLEAR policies page. We also want to make sure we're representing you correctly. Your projects are now up on the funded projects page of our website. Please read how your project is described there and let us know if you'd like us to adjust any of the information included. The project summaries are directly from your proposals. Thank you all for attending this presentation. We know we've covered a lot of information here, and we'll be sure to post a recording of this webinar as well as the slides, transcript, and Q&A on our Manage and Award page, alongside many of the other documents we discussed. We'd now like to ask a few quick poll questions before we shift to answering the questions you submitted during our presentation.
Hi all, I think as we indicated, we're going to skip the poll portion, but we do want to answer any questions that we've received from you all. So we're checking over the Q&A right now to start fielding those.
I'll start. We have a question that says, what type of instances would result in an interim report? So sometimes projects have extenuating circumstances that delay the completion of your project within the 1-year time limit that you currently have. If that happens, you'll need to request a grant modification request for a no-cost extension. And if this modification request is approved, you might be required to submit an interim report based on how long you asked for a report. Typically, we have to submit reports to Mellon a few times a year for our various programs, and we want to have a report from everybody every year. So that's when you would have to have an interim report added to your project. And make sure that you're requesting these modifications no sooner or no later than 4 to 6 weeks prior to your project end date.
Will we be limited by a character or word count in our project and financial narratives? The picture doesn't seem like it has one, but I wanted to double check. No, there are not word count caps for most of those narratives. I do believe in this system there is a page limit cap for the project narrative. That's a cap of 6 pages. I don't know that anyone's actually ever submitted a project narrative of 6 pages, but obviously you have a pretty fair amount of play there, wording wise.
What is a checksum? So a checksum on a file is a digital fingerprint, and that's where the smallest change to the file will cause the checksum to change it completely. What's most important is we want to be able to detect if the contents of a file have changed. And if we do it, then it won't tell us where that change has occurred. We usually use this to check the submitted metadata in your file manifest to make sure that your digitized files, the files that you will be digitizing through this grant, are accessible to the public. So that's what that is.
Most of our vendor quotes states that costs may exceed the quote as they may have to perform remediation work to digitize recordings. What happens if vendor costs exceed the quoted amount? Most vendors have worked in a contingency estimate into their quote, so you may see a contingency estimate in your quote. Frequently, there are changes to vendor costs, inclusive of increases and or decreases in the original estimate. This can be due to various factors, but if this is not built into your grant, you will need to submit a grant modification to reallocate funds from somewhere else in your proposal budget, or if you go entirely over your award amount, you would need to have your organization cover a cost share.
Is it possible to change the vendor now? If so, what is the process? If for some reason you need to change your vendor now, you will still have to work it into the budget that you originally submitted for the project, for the total project. We don't add additional funds to project funds or costs once you've been awarded and received your award letter. So if that changes, just like she said previously, you'll either have to move your budget around to reallocate it, get it approved by us, and also possibly initiate a cost share. We'll also need a vendor quote and an email to us right now as soon as possible with your updated vendor and vendor quote. So you will email us at recordings@risk@clear.org. So best bet is to email us and the justification why.
Any quarterly reports required during the course of the year? It sounds like just the final report is required. Yeah, you're only required to do the yearly report, a final report if you do not submit for an extension. If you ended up with a lengthy no-cost extension, you could possibly have to do an interim report.
I also want to say that we may be reaching out to some of the projects to do a 6-month check-in just to see how everything is going. If so, we'll reach out to you in advance to let you know and who we select to do those. Alyson, you want to take the next one?
I can really quickly say somebody followed up, is there a preferred type of checksum? No. Our IT department has built us a kind of customized crawler to handle these manifests. We do a yearly kind of aggregate crawl with it, and it can be rewritten to handle a variety of forms of checksum. To meet the needs of our variety of types of organizational recipients.
If a vendor completes their portion of the project and they were able to do the job and have grant money left over, could we submit a reallocation for that, or is this a return the funds situation? If this happens frequently, if you find out that you were able to complete the project and have money left over, you would submit a modification request for a reallocation of funds. Then what you would state, and we'd ask for a few statements that will coincide with that modification request. The newly digitized forms would have to be at the same standards as you proposed in your original proposal, that the new materials that you are nominating to have digitized also fits the original project scope, and also a statement, and all of this would be a statement that you would send the email, that there are no known rights, ethics, or reuse issues associated with the newly added materials.
Will you provide the links from the group chat to us outside of this webinar, like via email, or will this be found alongside the recording in the webinar? So alongside of the recording in the webinar, there will be both a transcript of this session, and since we actually got some substantive questions today, we have a companion Q&A document. Those will be posted on our Manage and Award page, and those two documents will contain the links that we've mentioned here. However, almost everything that we've mentioned in this conversation is directly linked from our Manage and Award page. So if you bookmark the Manage and Award page, all the other templates, webinars, reporting information, modification links, and requirements, all those links can be found there.
And I think there were two that were already answered in the Q&A doc, but if you're not following along, I'll just say, can we access the manifest from Manage and Award? I can't read the categories on the slide. It would be helpful to know them more fully. Yes, you can find a copy of the digitization file manifest template on the Manage and Award page. That Manage and Award page is going to be your friend. We have links to all kinds of templates, budget templates, the digital file manifest, additional instructions and assistance with everything that you're going to need. You will find on that Manage and Award page. And then the other question was, could you please provide the link to the return of the funds section on your website? That also is on the Manage and Award page. And then all organizations are required to report to CLEAR and return all unspent funds in the amount greater than $100 by check or ACH to CLEAR. And there's a CLEAR grants returns of fund policy that you can follow, and it'll tell you exactly where to send that stuff. Any other questions? Oh, here we go. There's another one.
These kind of, I should read the question so everybody knows. If the number of film reels to be digitized is adjusted, but the total footage remains the same, would a grant modification be needed, assuming there's not a change in cost? If you've like miscounted your materials from the start and there's not an issue of discrepancy with like a collections inventory, like some of our collections, some of you don't necessarily know exactly how many things you have, and in that instance a little bit of discrepancy either way is not something that requires a modification. If you have submitted a inventory list to us and you are swapping out items from that inventory list, then we would want a modification to adjust your list of collections. I believe that's accurate, Sharon.
Yeah, sounds accurate. Your collections list would probably need updating more so than anything else.
But there are certainly awardees that say we have X number of feet or X number of boxes, and they end up with slightly more or less actual files intended, and that is not something that requires a modification.
And that's something that happens frequently, so there's no need to worry about that. Any other questions? All right. Going once. All right. We're good. All right. Congratulations once again. And as always, if you have any other questions for us, you can always email us directly at recordings@risk@clear.org. And we will have the copy of these questions and answers along with the transcript and the video on our website soon. Have a good day.
Thanks, y'all.